Hello, coming to you from the holiday city of board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Thankful Bryce, and tied with the popular recurring Out of the Dust geek list on Board Game Geek. The Out of the Dust podcast is a bi-weekly podcast that is focused on re-exploring games we play that we hadn't previously played in a year or more. Why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. This week on the podcast, episode 76. On the Out of the Dust segment, I'll bring Column of Fire out of the dust, and a contributor will dust off Merchant of Venus. On the reaction segment, I continue my discussion of some more recent crowdfunding news. On the What I've Been Playing segment, I review Tekhenu. On the Obscure Bryce Game segment, I review Rattlebones, and we wrap up the episode by continuing a series of expansion reviews with Obsession, Upstairs, Downstairs. I had a chance to bring Column of Fire out of the dust recently. Column of Fire is the third part of the Pillars of the Earth trilogy, published by Cosmos and designed by Michael Reineck. I last played it 2 years, 2 months, and 7 days ago. I own a copy and played it a handful of times in the year after it came out, but it's sat dusty since then. Recently, during a meeting of a game design group I'm the chairperson of, one of the members mentioned wanting to design an engine-building tableau building game, but confessed they had not played too many of those in that genre. Column of Fire immediately sprang to my mind as a totally unique and innovative example of a game in that genre, and I suggested we play it after the meeting. I recall thinking even a couple of years ago that the tableau building with a time limit mechanism that the game revolves around, in which players assign dice to the cards they draft for the tableau, take down the pips on the dice each round, and then discard the card when the dice would hit 0, was something that felt completely different. In the years since, where several titles in the genre have enjoyed extraordinary success, the mechanism in Column of Fire still feels completely different than anything else out there. After playing it again, and with the perspective of a few years on the game, I think it's a really underappreciated game, and I'm glad I had a chance to teach some people it who hadn't been exposed to it before. This latest play was a very satisfying one, and I enjoyed a come-from-behind victory. I wouldn't mind playing this one more often, as I'm moving it up to my favorite in the Pillars of the Earth trilogy. Let's read a contributor brought out of the dust. Joe Farrell, username Arcturian, brought the classic sci-fi themed pick up and deliver game Merchant of Venus out of the dust. He last played it 1 year, 7 months, and 16 days ago, and currently rates it a 6 out of 10. He writes, as a gamer of only about 2 years, I've got a collection that's still small enough that my wife and I cycle through it in much less than a year. But I occasionally play a dusty game belonging to someone else, and I had one such this month. One of the guys in one of my weekly gaming groups owns the original Avalon Hill Merchant of Venus, which we played more than a year ago. Our group tends to be constantly playing new games, so I remember feeling pretty skeptical when I heard the plan was to break out a roll and move from the 80s. I was pleasantly surprised by my initial play, though. We had a fun time exploring the board, laughing at the intentionally ridiculous goods we were delivering, and cursing the dice when they didn't cooperate. This month we played the Fantasy Flight reprint instead of the original version, but on the classic side of the board, so it was basically the same game. The original game may or may not have elements that aren't in the FFG Classic version, but I know for sure that the original game had rules that we did not use when my friend first taught it to us. So the new game seemed functionally the same as the one I originally learned. I dropped my rating slightly after this latest play. It falls somewhere into that large category of games that I will play if asked, but will never suggest or seek out. It's a game that I think is really showing its age. Roll and move feels very antiquated to me. There are various ways to augment your movement, like acquiring technology that lets you skip over certain spaces, building ships that get more movement dice, etc., but still, the dice and certain other elements of the game feel more capricious than I want to see in a game of this length. I won the game and felt like it had more to do with my good luck in finding some very useful items early than it did with my strategy. Nonetheless, if my friend dusts it off again in another year or so, I'll be back at the table. Thanks for the contribution, Joe. I played this once several years ago and was sorely disappointed by it. It's the rare game that I had on my wish list and then took off after playing it. The movement system as used in the Merchant of Venus was just endlessly frustrating to me. As I recall, it was the original rules we played then, so I might be able to be talked into a second edition play sometime if I could be convinced it's different enough. Reaction segment time. This week on the reaction segment, I'm continuing to take a look at some Kickstarter-related news that has come down the pipe lately. First, guess what finally arrived in the mail? Deluxeified Luna! Yay! Now, it is a lovely production indeed, and the game itself was worth the wait. But Tasty Minstrel is not even close to being out of the woods as far as I'm concerned, just because I finally got what I paid for. I'm just one person after all. Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of the world backers are still in the dark concerning fulfillment with no light on the horizon for them. And the company still has 3 other Kickstarters that are currently completely outstanding. So they still have a lot of work to do, and in the meantime, their image isn't improving any. I've seen a lot of copies of Belfort Anniversary and Deluxeified Luna hit the secondary market already, and always with the tag, I'm not interested in this anymore, or something along those lines. These projects have left a bad taste in many people's mouths that will be hard to purge. If it wasn't for Stefan Feld's name on the box, I'd be tempted to move my copy along as well. As it is, I did get my copy to the table right away and enjoyed the upgraded components and new gameplay elements quite a bit. There are a lot of people who are not fans of the upgraded metal victory point counters, but I personally think the different sizes of moons used for those are pretty cool. And I was impressed at the impact the new Priestess figure had on the game. I also have a Game of Thrones card game Kickstarter creator update for you. Woohoo! That's right, the incorrigible and audacious Daniel Perez is in the news again. He's been arrested again, presumably for skipping the court dates he was supposed to show up for and didn't earlier in the year. This failure on his part prompted the legal system to put a bounty on his head, and there's a fascinating video on YouTube that the bounty hunter who caught him posted about the apprehension. It wasn't much of a capture, actually. All the bounty hunter had to do was show up at Daniel's house, go up to the bedroom, and drag Daniel out of bed. There was something astounding about that part, though. The bounty hunter loudly announced himself when he entered and made plenty of noise searching the main floor before heading up the stairs to the bedroom where Daniel was apparently sleeping through the proceedings. The bounty hunter had to wake him up and help him get dressed and ready before cuffing him and leading him out. The bounty hunter wasn't shy about his opinion of Daniel and posted this on Instagram later. We deal with a variety of people. Some are just goofy characters that mess up and miss their court dates. Some are hardened criminals who will stop at nothing to keep their freedom. And some are so far gone that they're just an empty shell of a human, with nothing but evil and malice inside them. Today's catch of the day was the last kind. So Daniel back in jail again, which means I'm expecting a new scheme of his to hit the internet any day now. This week on the What I've Been Playing, so I'm going to tell you about Tekhenu, the new game from publisher, board and dice and designer duo Daniel Tekhenu and David Turksey of Zulkin and Teotihuacan fame. Whew, that was a lot of T-words in that sentence. These guys have established such a track record of success in strung together an uninterrupted sequence of games I've personally enjoyed a lot that it was a real easy decision to get in on a pre-order of this one. At the time of the pre-order, just about every place was shut down, so the promise of another engaging solo mode was a big enticement to get in on this game. But by the time of its release, my main group was meeting again, and it wasn't long at all before I was able to get it to the table with them for a multiplayer game. Here's how it works. Players are Egyptian nobles assisting the construction of various monuments. Their success in this endeavor ultimately weighed in a variety of point-salad opportunities. Over the course of 16 total turns, players will draft dice from one of the 6 action areas surrounding the central obelisk. Dice can either produce the resource that matches their color or perform the action associated with the area that they were drafted from. In either case, the dice is either placed in the tainted or pure scale of their player board depending on where the dice was drafted from. The central obelisk casts a shadow and light-colored dice are pure in the sunny side of the obelisk and tainted in the dark side and vice versa for dark-colored dice. This is important because every so often a balance check is performed between the sum of pips on either side, which determines turn order for the following round and first choice of a menu of bonuses. Too much negative balance can even result in losing victory points. Each of the 6 action areas are associated with a different Egyptian god, and one area builds buildings in the workshop quarry area to increase production tracks. Another area builds buildings around the temple complex, which is the main thing being built in this game, which will score points a certain way during the 2 scoring rounds and get some immediate resources. Another area builds pillars in the temple complex to score points another way and get resources another way. There's an area to build statues and other action areas, which gain the building player resources when other players use that action area. There's an area to collect cards, which come in immediate passive effect and endgame scoring varieties. And there's an area to increase the happiness of one's population, which influences which cards can be taken from the card area and scores points yet another way during the scoring rounds. After 16 rounds, the game ends, and the player with the most points wins. Naturally. There's a lot going on in this game, which is no surprise given the designer's pedigree, But I want to give the publisher a shout out here for an excellent rulebook. They and the designers have established a reputation for that, and I think it's a significant part of the reason for why this duel's games have been so well received. And Tekhenu is no exception. With a solo game under my belt and the excellent rulebook at my side, I felt super confident teaching this game, and all of my teaches have gone really smoothly so far. Probably the most difficult part of the game is understanding the relationship between pure and tainted dice and how they shift from one to the other as the obelisk rotates and casts its shadow in different places. So I have a tip about that for teachers of new players. Let the players themselves use the handy reference card or printed iconography on the obelisk base to do that themselves when the time comes. That seems to help a lot and helps everyone in their planning of which dice to draft when and in seeing where new dice will come out from time to time. Speaking of the solo mode, those who have played Teotihuacan with the Teota bot will recognize some similarities in how the Tekhenu bot selects its actions each turn. If you liked how Teotihuacan played solo, you'll like the Tekhenu solo experience as well, I think. I've enjoyed it both solo and multiplayer. The dice drafting and need to balance the mix for some super engaging and agonizing decisions to make in time becomes a very satisfying challenge in the game. It's definitely the sort of game where you're not going to have time to accomplish everything you want to do, and have to make do with the opportunities you can create at any given time. The emphasis on adaptive strategy for success definitely appeals to me, and it's just the way I like this kind of game. Of the designer duo's famous T games, Teotihuacan has become my most played one, but I could see Tekhenu giving it a run for its money eventually. Obscure Bryce game segment time. This week on this segment, I'm going to tell you about Rattlebones, a 2014 dice-building game from publisher Rio Grande and designer Stephen Glenn, who is best known for Balloon Cup. As the first dice-building game, the mechanic was the main thing that initially attracted me to the game when it first came out. Though the off-putting, creepy vibe, art, and unusual theme also caught my attention. In fact, let me read the theme description of Rattlebones from BGG for you. Welcome, girls and boys. My name is Rattlebones, and you have been cordially invited to spend the day at my fabulous festival of dice. Play games, win prizes, ride the train. I'll be wandering about the park, and if you're the first one to find me, you win. Won't that be delightful? Yeah, probably not. In any event, the smooth, addictive gameplay of Dice Forge has made the latter game the preeminent dice-building game on the market, and Rattlebones has faded into obscurity in the meantime. But should it have? Here's how it works. The board is composed of dice face spaces. On their turn, players will choose one of their dice to roll and one of their monkey-wearing-a-hat meeples to move. The player then adds the dice face they landed on to the dice they rolled, and if they roll that face in the future, they earn a special benefit of some kind. These benefits might be the ability to roll additional dice or earn points in a variety of point-salad ways, including set collection and stocks. Players advance their mouse point meeple along the point track each time they earn points in some way. Meanwhile, anytime someone rolls a 1, they advance the Mr. Rattlebones meeple who is advancing the other direction on the score track. The first player who meets Mr. Rattlebones with their score marker, kind of Rajas of the Ganges style, is the winner. A wide variety of dice faces and a variable dice face space setup guarantees a different combination of faces available each game, which makes the game highly variable each time and very replayable as a result. Compared to Dice Forge, which I do like a lot. I do like Rattlebones better, though. There's a wonderful tension that mounts over the course of the game as each player gets closer and closer to meeting Mr. Rattlebones. The dice customization is very engaging, and the choice of which dice to roll and which player's piece to move each turn creates interesting decisions throughout the entire game. There are some fascinating strategic decisions to make in determining which number faces to replace with which ability faces, and where to position pieces around the board as a result, to take advantage of rolling certain number of abilities at different points in the game. The theme doesn't make any sense, but that's part of what makes each game so memorable. My whole family loves this game, and it's become one of our October traditions to make sure to play each year. Our last play was particularly memorable as it played out in a way that no other play had before, which is a trademark of the game. This time I managed to collect all of the star tokens and run out the supply before cashing them all in once for a fabulous amount of set collection points. This week I continue my review of 2020 expansions with Upstairs Downstairs, the expansion for Obsession, the Victorian romance-themed game from publisher Kayenta Games and designer Dan Halligan. Despite my appreciation for the unique theme, it's not a game that caught my attention during its initial Kickstarter run, mainly due to some off-putting graphic design decisions. But by the time the expansion hit Kickstarter, there were enough positive reviews of the game for me to look past its surface appearance and go all in. Did I make the right choice? Well, here's how the expansion works first. Like many other expansions lately, Upstairs Downstairs is a modular expansion offering a variety of component parts to mix and match at will. First, the expansion includes a new house, which increases the player count options up to 6. I'm really not sure how 6 players would feel in this game, but the lower player counts move along at a fairly brisk pace, and a few portions of turns that could be performed simultaneously lead me to believe it might not be as unpleasant an experience as some other 6-player Euro games. The high player count also opens up team play, which my experiences with Concordia Venus make me leery of. But even without maximizing the player count or ever using team play, the new house with its new variable player setup is the sort of thing that is welcome all by itself in this kind of game. Another module offers up a ton of new room tiles and guest cards, which significantly increases the quantity of those components. These are all easy to integrate into the game and is the sort of modular component that just increases the variability of an already very replayable game. So no issues there, with the possible exception that some existing objective cards that rely on finding particular room tiles are now a little more difficult to achieve. But these cards were already worth fabulous amounts of points, and I think the increased difficulty of achieving them actually balances out the risk of pursuing them in the first place. Plus, the addition of twice as many objective cards and new rules about how to gain them offer players more interesting decisions to make during the course of the game, which is always a good thing. The main new module are the new servant meeples, which rather than fulfill requirements of playing certain room tiles or guest cards, enhance those existing elements instead. I found these guys very interesting and have found myself focusing on different ones in different games depending on how the game is evolving. Another module introduces milestone cards, which are public objectives players can try to achieve before others. Another thing worth mentioning about the expansion is that it includes a component upgrade for the victory point cards in the base game. These cards were ridiculously tiny and are now typical small card size instead, which is a huge improvement. The original Ultra Mini cards were included in the base game, and I couldn't believe the difference. So I really like all of these modular additions. The only thing I'm not a fan of is the rulebook. Like the base game, the expansion rulebook is not great. It's overly long, poorly organized, and laid out to make straightforward elements appear more convoluted than they really are in practice. But despite that, the expansion managed to achieve success in the ease of integration consideration. Like Controlled Chaos for Dinogenics, I found it super easy to just add all of this new content in all at once. Each module works well with the others, builds upon existing concepts, and is easy to grasp for both experienced players and players new to the game entirely. I'm really glad I backed the expansion and game all in. My wife enjoyed our inaugural play a lot, and it's gone over well with my various gaming groups, and with the solo mode also offering up a satisfying experience, I foresee this getting plenty of regular table time in the time to come. Well, that will do it for episode 76. Thanks for listening. Feel free to join the Out of the Dust Podcast Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at OutOfTheDustBGG. Leave a comment at the Guild. PM me on BGG under user handle Radagast14 or user handle AndLee14. And email me at radagast14@CenturyLink.net. And join the Out of the Dust conversation yourself at our monthly geek list at BGG. Alright, play me out, Tananda!